People don't fall for Valencia because it's pretty. They fall because it feels like a city that gets you, even before you understand why. This isn't about beaches with umbrellas or a sunlit old town. It's about the gap between how you think you'll feel in a place and how you actually do feel there. And that difference is exactly what draws people back again and again. And that difference is why some people come for a visit and quietly start imagining a life. When most people think of Spain, their minds jump to flamenco, tapas crawls, and packed plazas at midnight. And sure, Valencia has all of that in its own way. Here's what most visitors don't realize at first. Valencia isn't trying to be anything other than itself. Here's what most people get wrong. They expect Spain with an accent. What they find is a city with a personality. Gentle but confident, warm but unrushed, traditional yet surprisingly modern. Here's the part that people only notice later. Valencia doesn't shout at you, it welcomes you. And that subtle difference changes everything. It's not about spectacle, it's about rhythm. While Madrid pushes forward and Barcelona pulses with intensity, Valencia breathes slowly. From the moment you arrive, you sense the pace is different, not slower, not lazy, but tuned to human scale. And that shift, even if you don't articulate it yet, begins to soften you. It begins in small ways. How people walk, how they talk, how cafes open their doors to the street rather than hide behind glass, or the silence in the street at siesta, when even the breeze seems to pause. If you're the kind of person who's curious about how a city feels instead of what it looks like, then Valencia is the moment your expectations meet a reality more subtle, more humane, and unexpectedly powerful. After a few days here, most people say something like this. It's not that I fell in love with a landmark, it's that I started living in moments. Not every city gives you that feeling. Valencia doesn't require deep research or hidden treasures to charm you. Its beauty shows up in the normal stuff. The way light hits the Turia Gardens at sunset, the air smell of freshly baked bread in the morning, the friendly nod of someone sitting next to you in a cafe, the clink of espresso cups at 10 a.m., like a daily ritual shared by strangers. Here's what most visitors get wrong. They look for something dramatic and impressive. Valencia doesn't need to compete with drama. Its power is in presence. And here's where many stop and rethink. Life here feels like the city assumes you're someone who matters. Not important, not special. Just considered in the fabric of daily life. The bus routes, the bike lanes, the plazas with shade trees, the neighborhoods where a butcher knows your order. They all reflect a city scaled for people more than crowds. Someone here once told me, in Valencia, you can be a human being before you become a tourist. That's the emotional core that captivates. People stay because they begin to notice the difference between being in a city and being part of it. And then, something else begins to happen. Quietly, almost invisibly. Your relationship with time starts to change. In many cities, time feels like a negotiation. You're either chasing it or defending yourself from it. Days are measured in efficiency, in progress, in what comes next. In Valencia, time feels less like a force and more like a background. People don't check the clock as often. Conversations don't end abruptly. They taper off naturally. Lunch stretches, not because anyone is avoiding work, but because no one feels the need to rush back into motion. You notice it in small moments. A cafe table stays yours even after your cup is empty. A conversation pauses, resumes, drifts, without apology. A shop closes not because business is slow, but because the day has reached its natural hinge. And slowly, without announcing itself, you stop measuring your day in tasks. You start measuring it in moments. A walk that takes longer than planned. A sentence that turns into a story. an afternoon that dissolves into evening without resistance. This isn't laziness, it's alignment. The city isn't pulling you forward or pushing you back. It's letting you exist at a pace that feels human. And when time softens, something else softens too. Your shoulders, your attention, your sense of always being on the way somewhere else. That's when many people realize what's really happening. They didn't slow down because they chose to. They slowed down because the city stopped demanding speed. And once you experience that, once your inner rhythm matches the place you're in, it becomes surprisingly hard to go back to cities that treat time like a weapon. Let me ask you something. What if the best parts of a city aren't its highlights, but how it shapes your everyday? Valencia answers that question quietly and insistently. No discussion about Valencia makes sense without the sea. But it isn't just that there's a beach. It's how the city grows into the coast. With respect, not spectacle. Most people think beaches are for vacation. Valencia treats its beaches as part of life. You see it in the morning. Joggers weaving between palms and sand, and friends who hop off their bikes after work to dunk their feet in the water, and kids who come to the shore with the same familiarity as the park down the street. Even the sound of volleyballs bouncing blends into the rhythm of the afternoon. And if you think that's just lifestyle polish, this is where the deeper pattern shows. Valencia doesn't separate city from nature. It blends them. The Turia Gardens, once a riverbed, was reclaimed not as infrastructure or stadiums, but as a ribbon of green life winding through the city. There's elegance in that decision. A city that knows its own geography and chooses spaces for people, not traffic. And this is uncomfortable for many to admit. The urban life here feels richer because the city didn't sacrifice breathing room in pursuit of density. This is where the city stops being scenery and starts being a choice. How often does a major city willingly give up what others fight to keep? Here's what most people overlook. Valencia's balance isn't accidental. It's deliberate. When you walk through the Turia Gardens toward the horizon of the sea, you feel the city stretch, not tense, across the land. That tensionless extension becomes part of your own experience of space. This is how a city makes you feel lighter, by design, not by chance. This is where the city stops being scenery and starts becoming part of you. At this point, you might be thinking, I'm not here for a list of sights. I want to understand how a place gets under your skin. If that's you, someone who watches cities rather than just visits them, you are exactly the kind of viewer this journey speaks to. You're not someone looking for postcard moments. You're someone seeking the invisible rhythms beneath the surface. And Valencia has rhythms. They're not loud, they're not flashy, they are deeply human. Valencia wears its history, but it doesn't live in the past. The old town is not a preserved museum. People live there. Kids run around those ancient streets. Daily life hums alongside Gothic facades and Baroque gates. And somewhere in a corner, laundry flutters across a 14th century alley. But walk a few blocks and you'll hit the City of Arts and Sciences, a bold, futuristic complex that looks as if imagination built itself a home. This juxtaposition feels confusing at first, because our minds are wired to expect either old or new. Here, they coexist. And that coexistence tells you something about the city's soul. Valencia does not fear contradictions. It does not pretend the old is more authentic than the new. It simply lets both be. Cultural authenticity isn't a purity test. It's a living dialogue between yesterday and tomorrow. The city doesn't erase its history. It converses with it. That conversation shapes how people look at their own stories, as traditions to be honored and possibilities to be expanded. Open plazas hold festivals with roots centuries old. Around the corner, avant-garde exhibitions, electronic music nights, designers rethinking Mediterranean identity for a global age. In Valencia, tradition isn't static. It's a companion bridging generations. Valencia trusts its identity enough to let it be questioned. And that kind of confidence feels strangely calming. Most people think history and future are separate lanes. But in Valencia, they dance in the same square. If you've heard about paella in Valencia, know this. The real story isn't the dish itself. It's that food here is a social practice. In many places, food becomes a touristic checklist. In Valencia, it is the glue of community. Families gather around paella, not as a spectacle, but as a weekly ritual. Neighbors meet at markets and share news, rather than just groceries. Cafes don't close once the sun dips. They change tempo. The sound of plates stacking becomes the pulse of the evening. Here's what most people miss. The food scene is not a series of bites. It's a sequence of shared moments. People talk, debate, laugh, linger. Eating in Valencia isn't fuel. It's presence. You see someone you met yesterday? You stop. You talk. The city rewards presence. This isn't just sociability. It's a social architecture that supports connection over pace. If you're someone who cares about why a place feels like a home for the mind and heart, this matters. Valencia invites participation, not observation. Participation. It asks you to sit, to share, to absorb rhythms that aren't about efficiency, but about human feeling. And this is not nostalgia. This is intentional living. The first time someone remembered my order, I realized I wasn't just passing through. Before this ends, consider this. Maybe your favorite city isn't the one you travel to the most, but the one that quietly reshapes your idea of what life could be. So why does Valencia conquer everyone who visits or stays? It's not because of the sun or the beaches or even the food. It's because Valencia feels like a city that makes space for you, for others, and for life itself. It makes room for history and future to talk. It makes room for everyday smallness to feel rich. It makes room for people to matter more than schedules. And here's the quiet but profound truth. Valencia doesn't seduce you with grandeur. It wins you with human scale, with rhythm, with nuance. And if you've ever wondered why certain places continue to call you back in your mind long after you've left, this is that kind of city. It doesn't just live on the map, it changes how you see maps. Imagine that. For those who find meaning not just in sights, but in the lived emotional texture of a place. Valencia doesn't just reward curiosity, it deepens it. If you're here for understanding rather than checklist travel, you already know. The real journey is how a place reshapes your inner world. And Valencia does exactly that.